Southern California natives Angie and Gino were happily married with two young healthy sons. Although the family was doing well, the parents thought something was missing in their lives. They definitely knew they were blessed to have their small family, but felt a baby girl that would run around with the boys would make everything complete. Angie and Gino really wanted a daughter and kept praying to have one. Then one day, Angie took a pregnancy test and the family was over the moon when the result came out. But wait, there was more. The parents were thrilled that they were expecting a baby and eager to hold their bundle of joy in their arms, but they also didn't want to find out whether the child was a boy or girl. Of course, the couple would be happy with either, but they were still hopeful their dream of having a girl would become a reality. Finally, it was time to find out the sex of the baby. The couple's hearts leapt for joy when the nurse turned to them and said it's a girl, but that wasn't all the ultrasound revealed. Angie and Gino were delighted to hear that Angie was pregnant with a baby girl, but as the doctor checked the ultrasound, the expression on his face changed from excitement to surprise, and the couple wondered why. As it turned out, Angie wasn't carrying just one baby, but three girls. The couple was shocked and elated at the same time to hear the wonderful news. Angie was ecstatic that she was expecting triplets. Their prayers had finally been answered. Sadly, the news wasn't all good. Angie and Gino were beyond shocked to hear they were going to be parents to triplets, but the ultrasound also revealed something strange. There were more surprises as the doctor explained what he'd discovered. During the ultrasound, Angie's doctor noticed she had two placentas. What this meant that two of the girls had split at a single egg and were sharing a placenta, making them identical. The third baby, however, had formed from a separate egg, and this was a really rare case. Angie and Gino had no idea their prayers would be answered threefold. From then on, they learned more unique things about their babies apart from the fact that two of the triplets were identical. The couple didn't have IVF, so Angie's chances of getting pregnant with triplets were very slim. In fact, the odds of having triplets through natural conception is just 1 in 4,000, while the possibility of having triplets where two are identical is way slimmer. While Angie and Gino were euphoric about their growing family, they knew that they also need to start preparing for their new additions. Their lives were about to get turned upside down, but in a beautiful and fulfilling way. Angie and Gino started getting ready for their baby's arrival on time. They hired a nanny, bought a minivan, and got in contact with their family and friends for support. They also both had jobs, so they requested parental leave from their employer so they wouldn't miss the first precious moments of their newborn's lives. Because Angie was expecting triplets, her pregnancy was considered high risk. A few months into her pregnancy, Dr. Danishman took his time to explain to the couple that this would be significantly different from when Angie was pregnant with her sons. While Angie and Gino understood there could be complications with the pregnancy down the road, nothing could have prepared them for what they were about to encounter. Things were about to get really serious and they would need all the help they could get. Just 26 weeks into her pregnancy with the triplets, Angie experienced major complications. The doctor discovered there was a fluid discrepancy, and this meant Angie and her unborn babies could be in serious trouble. In an interview with Sharp Healthcare, Angie said, "We saw that the liquid for baby B was too low and C was a little high. When a baby's still growing in utero, their fluid levels affect their nutrition and protection, so it was extremely important for Angie's doctors to do something fast to keep mom and her baby safe." The fluid discrepancy was a serious threat to two of Angie's unborn girls. Too high or too low fluid meant there was a chance the babies would be born with brain hemorrhaging and underdeveloped lungs. This meant Angie had to put her daily routine on hold and put her and her baby's health first. To make sure that mom and her triplets receive adequate care, Dr. Danishman urged Angie to immediately move into the hospital and stay there for the remainder of her pregnancy. As anyone would be, Angie was surprised. "I said, wait, right now?" She said in an interview with Sharp Healthcare. Both mom and her babies needed to be monitored around the clock, so it was important that Angie took her doctor's advice. No doubt, Angie was ready to do everything possible to make her triplets be fine, but moving into the hospital full-time was a huge undertaking. At just 26 weeks into her pregnancy, it meant she would be in the hospital for weeks, and with two young boys at home, it was understandable she was worried about how her family would cope. Staying at the hospital was no easy task for Angie. Aside from being placed on strict bed rest, she really missed the comfort of her home. What's more, she was apart from her husband and two sons, but the family made it work. Angie, Gino, and the boys had to make sacrifices, but it was for the good of all of them. On the bright side, Gino and the boys visited mom every day. It wasn't like when they were all at home, but at least they could all be together. And of course, the nurses were a tremendous help too. With Angie now at the hospital, her perception of home had suddenly changed. Her new home, though temporarily, was now the hospital, and she and Gino did all they could to make it feel cozy and as much as home as possible. The nurses understood that it was a hard time for the family, as they've witnessed many other families go through the same, so they were very helpful. "They've taken away everything from what's normal," Tony Hicks, RN, said in an interview with Sharp Healthcare. "So by telling them, I understand this is really hard for you, that's huge for our patients." Angie was going through a pretty difficult time. As if carrying a high-risk pregnancy wasn't enough, she also had to be forced to leave her home and move into the hospital for weeks. To make matters worse, she could only see her beloved husband and sons for a few hours each week during visitation. Although this was Angie and Gino's new norm, they were determined to do all they could to keep Angie in good spirits. One of the fun activities the couple loved doing together at the hospital was date night. "This is our date night that we never get at home," Angie said while the couple ate dinner together in her room. Pregnancy's a beautiful journey, but can also have unexpected twists and turns. A birth plan can be very useful in preparing for a baby's arrival. Angie's medical team was keeping up with Angie and the babies through the journey, and they knew that triplets would likely be placed in a neonatal intensive care unit, NICU, due to their small size. So before Angie's due date, she and Gino went on a tour of the NICU at the hospital so they'd be prepared for whatever could crop up down the road. Hearing her precious babies could potentially end up in NICU was a bitter pill to swallow for any expectant mom, but Angie remained optimistic throughout the tour and even afterward. Touring the NICU and having her birth plan made Angie feel like she could weather any storm during her pregnancy. "You hear a lot of stories, of triplets who don't make it, or especially of identical twins. The body absorbs one of them," Angie said. "I didn't see the NICU as a sad place, I saw it as a place that was empowering for me." Meanwhile, a new challenge was brewing. With Angie fully at the hospital, it was easy for her medical team to observe her and her babies every day. In one of their routine ultrasound checks, they discovered that baby B was smaller than baby A and C. Although this was expected, considering baby B and baby C were sharing one placenta, the medical team still needed to continue monitoring the situation. By this time, Angie was already more than halfway through her pregnancy, but there was a high risk that if she delivered now, the babies would be premature. While Angie was at the hospital, she and her doctors were aiming for just one thing: for Angie to carry her babies for at least 34 weeks. They knew that with her condition, she had a slim chance of carrying them full term, but if she could make it to 34 weeks without going into labor, it would still be a win. This meant the triplets would have enough time to develop in the womb. If they were carried for less than 34 weeks, then they'd be underdeveloped, making them more likely to have complications. Angie was now more than 30 weeks along in her pregnancy, and all she could do was take it one day at a time. Although she, Gino, and the boys couldn't wait to meet the triplets, she understood the longer they stayed in her womb, the more time they'd have to grow. Still, the couple was prepared for anything at this point. "Anything could happen between now and my due date," she said in an interview with Sharp Healthcare. "We could have contractions that can't control, we may do an emergency C-section. But for us, we don't count the weeks here, we count the days." But unbeknownst to Angie, she'd been holding her babies sooner than she thought. Although Angie and her medical team were hoping to make it to 34 weeks, the triplets decided to make their debut earlier. When Angie was just 32 weeks and a day pregnant, she went into labor. It was time for action, and everybody got ready for what was next. Gino said, "3 little stars will be born tonight," and as Angie was wheeled into the delivery room, she added, "I have some hard work ahead of me now." She prepared herself physically and psychologically for what was to come. In the labor room, Angie was dilated and everyone was ready to receive the girls. Angie had added a C-section to her birth plan. She talked about giving birth naturally with doctors, but to avoid complications, they decided a C-section was the safest option. All hands were on deck. The medical team got Angie ready, and soon the surgery began. One after the other, the baby girls were delivered, with each weighing just under 4 pounds. The girls were named Daniela, Annabella, and Camilla. The medical team had predicted that Angie might give birth earlier than their 34-week goal, so they were ready. Considering Daniela, Annabella, and Camilla were born a few weeks premature, an advanced life support team was assigned to each of them. This was to ensure the girls received the best of care after birth. Following the birth of each child, they were passed through a window to another room beside the operating room. Here, the girls were assessed, stabilized, and assisted with their breathing before being moved into the NICU. After carrying a baby for months and enduring many hours of labor, a mother's greatest desire is to wrap her arms around her newborn. It saddened Angie that she couldn't see her newborns right after delivery, but she knew the wait was only temporary. Since the girls were so small and fragile at birth, it was important to get them to the NICU immediately. While Angie was sad that she couldn't bond with her baby girls right away, she took comfort in knowing they were being cared for. At birth, Daniela, Annabella, and Camilla weighed just below 4 pounds each. Because they were born a few weeks early, their lungs hadn't fully formed yet, and this made them have problems breathing on their own. Thankfully, Angie's medical team was ready to handle the issue. They acted swiftly to open up the baby's lungs and ensure they were receiving enough oxygen by putting them on CPAP. The triplets were definitely in good hands, but it was a lot for Angie and Gino to take in as they looked on helplessly. At a certain point, the triplets' oxygen levels were as low as 55%, but Angie's medical team was ready to get the level up to normal. The baby's tiny lungs needed to be opened up using pressure, so they were put on a CPAP. In the meantime, Angie finally saw her babies for the first time on a digital camera. It was definitely not the same as holding and feeling them herself, but it was the most she could have at that time. Angie and Gino were now more eager than ever to meet their beautiful girls. With Daniela, Annabella, and Camilla at the NICU, the nurses diligently kept an eye on them around the clock. As you remember, the triplets were still quite small, so they were prone to developing other complications. Melina Harper, one of the RNs that took care of the girls, said, "You know, I really empathize with the parents that have to have their babies and be separated from them. It was hard for Angie to be separated from her daughters, but that was going to change sooner than she thought." After the initial hubbub with her delivery, the medical team was able to stabilize Daniela, Annabella, and Camilla, and they fared better. Although they still had to remain in the NICU for some time, the girls were stable and able to breathe by themselves. The girls wouldn't be ready to go home for a while as they still needed to be monitored, but they were ready to see their mom and dad for the first time. Angie's heartwarming reaction when she first met her little darlings will melt your heart. Right from the time Angie was wheeled into the labor room, it had been a roller coaster ride. And after a long 32-week journey, the day the couple had been waiting for was finally here. Angie and Gino were about to hold the answers to their prayers in their arms for the very first time. As the medical team filled Angie and Gino on the progress of Daniela, Annabella, and Camilla, letting them know the girls were stable, things quickly started getting real. Every second that ticked drew them closer to meeting their daughters. NICU nurses are used to dealing with emotional situations. They come across them every day. They meet parents trying to navigate one of the toughest situations of their lives, and it's easy to form a bond with them and their kids. This holds true for the nurses who cared for the triplets in the NICU. They were thrilled the babies were doing well and Angie and Gino would soon meet them. "I love to see the initial contact between mommy and baby," Melina Harper said. "I always look for that. That moment is just theirs and I get to be a part of." Despite the fact that Angie's journey with her triplets was just beginning, she was doing very well while recovering from her C-section. Mom and her girls were in stable condition and the medical team decided they could finally meet. The nurses wheeled Angie to the NICU and Gino walked beside them. The couple could hardly contain their joy. Their dream had come true and was more than ever asked for. At last, Angie and Gino arrived at the NICU and the nurses wheeled Angie to the stations that held each of the girls. When Angie delivered them, she didn't get the opportunity to hold them, so she was super excited to finally meet Danielle, Annabella, and Camilla. As the nurses handed her one of the babies, Angie became overwhelmed with emotions. As their bodies touched, she was consumed with so much joy she couldn't hold back tears. She turned to Gino and said, "It feels so right." Angie had only been apart from her daughters for a few hours, but to the new mom of triplets, it felt a lot longer. "It was only a few hours apart from them and I already missed them," Angie said, "so it feels good to be reunited." One after the other, the nurses softly picked up the girls and handed them over to Angie. She took in every single moment with her beloved babies. She heard each of them cry and was able to soothe them back to sleep. Now it wasn't just mom that was eager to meet the girls. Dad too was anxious and couldn't wait to hold them. Gino finally got a chance to meet Daniela, Annabella, and Camilla, and the nurses even tucked each of them into their father's shirt so they could take advantage of skin-to-skin contact. Skin-to-skin is encouraged because it benefits preterm babies. During skin-to-skin contact, your body acts as a natural incubator, regulating your body's temperature to suit the baby's needs. In most cases, infants don't open their eyes immediately after they're born, but when Annabella was placed on her father's chest, she opened her eyes and attempted to look at him. When he would begin to speak, her eyes would follow his mouth as though she was trying really hard to hear what he was saying. "Look at that, she's opening her eyes listening to me," Gino said. "Beautiful, beautiful feeling." After a few weeks in the NICU, the triplets were stable enough to be discharged so they could finally go home. It had been quite a journey from when Angie moved to the hospital up until the arrival of her babies and thereafter, but it was all worth it with mom and her daughters doing really well. At long last, the family felt truly complete. As the girls grew up, they continued to flourish and developed individual personalities, and in no time they were already turning 6. The days flew by so fast and it seemed like only yesterday that Angie and Gino held their triplets for the first time in the NICU. After their bumpy start to life, the girls grew up quickly and were healthy. Now it was time to celebrate their 6th birthday. Much has changed in 2011 when Angie birthed her daughters. While back then it seemed like her time at the hospital lingered forever, the kids' first 6 years seemed to have flashed by. Being a parent is no easy task, not to mention being a parent to 5 kids, 3 of them being triplets. But Angie and Gino were committed to making it work. As a result of their determination to always put their family first, the couple does everything they can to ensure their kids live happy and healthy lives with beautiful memories they can always look back on. They might make it look easy, but we know that raising such a large family is no piece of cake, so hats off to them. Having a family with 5 kids definitely comes with its challenges. It can get tough sometimes, but they've got each other's back. It's also a busy life, but it's undeniably a lot of fun too. Just over 10 years ago, Angie and Gino were praying for a baby girl to make their family complete. Their prayers were answered and they even got more than what they asked for. Now they're a happy and healthy family of 7 and the kids are thriving. It's a big family, but Angie and Gino love it just the way it is. The couple calls their life fun chaos. With the triplets now growing along with their older brothers, it's difficult for Angie and Gino to imagine how their life was before their brood entered the picture. It surely is a full house with 3 beautiful girls and 2 cute boys, but the couple loves their special family just the way it is. It's truly a dream come true to have them come into my life, Angie says. If you enjoyed listening to this touching story, keep on listening for one mom's journey as she overcame incredible odds to birth miracle triplets. 23-year-old Becky Jo Allen and her husband Liam Tierney lived with their daughter Indiana in Liverpool, England. The couple was anxious to grow their family and were overjoyed when Becky Jo announced she was pregnant. But just then, Becky Jo started feeling queasy. From the onset, Becky Jo experienced persistent headaches and nausea, more severe than what she'd had to deal with during her first pregnancy. To find a solution, the couple visited the doctor and Becky Jo had an ultrasound. They had no clue what they were about to receive, but it was the biggest surprise of their lives. Becky Jo was carrying not 1 but 3 baby boys. She and her beau felt a mix of surprise and relief hearing the news. "It was the biggest shock of my life," Becky Jo recalled in an interview. "We haven't gotten any triplets in the family, so it came completely out of the blue." According to statistics, the probability of conceiving triplets is 1 in 9,000. The likelihood decreases if the mother is young. Becky Jo was 23 and doesn't use fertility treatments like Becky Jo. Her triplets were unplanned and conceived naturally, making them totally unexpected. But that was just the beginning. Her journey was about to get more complicated and scary. Although Becky Jo's pregnancy eased for a short while, the couple received another shock when the pregnancy hit 31 weeks. Becky Jo began experiencing contractions. Although the babies were healthy, they weren't developed enough and thus not ready to be born. 31 weeks is a little over 7 months, while the average pregnancy lasts for about 38 weeks. Liam and Becky Jo raced to the hospital, where the doctors quickly performed a C-section in order to save all 3 babies. But it wasn't over yet, as you'll soon find out. Thankfully, the triplets survived the cesarean section. They were named Roman, Rocco, and Rohan. The boys were healthy, but Becky Jo couldn't spend time with them after birth because they were immediately whisked off to the NICU. All the boys' weights were below what's considered normal, around 5 pounds. Rocco weighed 3 pounds 5 ounces. Roman weighed 3 pounds 6 ounces. At 3 pounds 10 ounces, Rowan was the heaviest. The boys still had a few hurdles ahead to overcome. The health risks for twins and triplets are higher early after birth. They're prone to complications and congenital disabilities that can cause life-threatening situations. To ensure they're properly developed, the triplets remained in intensive care for 6 weeks. During this time, their heart rate, respiratory rate, temperature, and blood pressure were constantly monitored. Preemies need extra care as their bodies develop and they complete their terms outside their mother's womb. Angie and Gino visited their daughters often. Though there were wires and tubes obscuring their faces, their parents' hearts were bursting with love for them. Becky Jo and Liam couldn't wait to take their babies back home, but little did they know the journey wouldn't end there. Fortunately, the triplets' time at the NICU went smoothly and they didn't develop complications. They finally went home with their mom and dad after 6 weeks. In preparation for their arrival, Becky Jo and Liam spent time setting up the boys' room and stocking up on baby items. The couple had thought there wouldn't be any more surprises with their boys, but they were wrong. On their first night back from NICU, Roman briefly stopped breathing, frightening Becky Jo. Thankfully, it happened just once and the triplets stayed healthy afterward, but then strangers on the street started noticing something puzzling. As the family went about their daily routines, people began stopping Becky Jo on the street and telling her how much the boys look alike. To know the truth, Becky Jo swabbed the inside of her baby's cheeks and sent them to a lab for DNA test. Are 2 of the boys identical? Are all 3 fraternal? The result was mind-blowing. It's normal for triplets to appear similar. Most are fraternal, and this means they develop from separate eggs. Sometimes, while one egg develops separately, another will split in 2, making 2 of the triplets identical. Even if that was the case with Becky Jo's boys, it was still difficult for anyone to tell them apart. Why was this so? The 3 boys had all come from a single egg. One egg split 3 ways, forming 3 separate individuals. This means the triplets are all identical. At first, the doctors told Baby Jo the triplets were monozygotic, but this turned out to be false. Even the medical professionals were shocked and had to reevaluate their work. Several sources state the odds of conceiving identical triplets are anywhere from 1 in 60,000 to 1 in 200 million. The odds of Becky Jo experiencing this was extremely rare. This occurrence marveled doctors. Next, a simple mathematical explanation of how special Becky's Jo boys are. Identical triplets are an extremely rare phenomenon. The chances of a mother giving birth to more than 1 baby or multiple births is 1 in 67. Even at that, the majority of multiple births are dizygotic, meaning the babies are conceived from 2 separate eggs. For Becky Jo's triplets, 1 egg split into 2 and then the second part split again. The odds of 1 egg dividing into 2 is 1 in 250, and this occurred twice with Roman, Rocco, and Rohan. This makes their births so rare that most of us will likely never witness such a phenomenon again. Identical triplets have the same DNA, meaning the boys share the same blood type, eye color, and hair color. The interesting thing is some of the triplets' traits would differ between each other, meaning they'll have different fingerprints and teeth marks, for example. The triplets would also develop individual personalities and talents as they grow older. Environmental factors would cause them to grow differently, but it's most likely that Becky Joe's triplets would have similar personalities and IQs throughout their lives. So how can anyone tell them apart? Of course, their parents have a little trick. Despite their strikingly identical appearances, with time Becky Joe and Liam learn how to tell their triplets apart. Becky Joe explained they've all got dark birthmarks between their eyebrows, but Roman's is slightly darker than the others, and Rohan's got a birthmark on his leg too. But they all have completely different personalities, Becky Joe added. The parents also share that Rohan shouts often, Rocco's laid back, and Roman doesn't like sharing his toys. We're not surprised the parents learned to tell their boys apart so quickly. Raising identical triplets is obviously not an easy task. Here's how the couple manages. On her Instagram page, the mom of four shared that raising identical triplets is no walk in the park. Fortunately, save for the first night after an ICU, the boys had no serious health issues. However, each day raising them remains a challenge. Becky Joe explained that running errands around town can be tasking. She'd often get stopped by people who are curious about the triplets, learning to their surprise they're identical. In spite of that and many other challenges that come with motherhood, Becky Joe seems to be a delightful mom, with overflowing love for her squad.